So in this section, we're going to begin a lesson on constructors. So what are constructors? Constructors are basically a method that executes a block of code immediately after you instantiate your object. So I'm going to show you an example. I'm going to create an I'm going to call this cell phone. So we've created a cell phone class, and in here we can have every cell phone has a name, right? So we'll say cell phone. Wait. Cell phone. And then we can have, what else can we have? We can have a color. And we can say double megapixel camera. Right. So we can say public void call. You just output calling. You can have another method here that we can say show information, or let's just call this details. And here we can just output something like cell phone plus, and I'm just gonna create a line break here, and I'm gonna say color. And what I want to do is actually specify down here that we're trying to print out the name of the cell phone, the color of the cell phone, and so on. So we can say, and add another line break and say megapixel camera. We can say megapixel camera down here. Megapixel. Just like this. Nothing too complicated. And then here we can create our getters, our setters first. Doesn't matter which one is first and which one is last, but so this will be I'm just gonna say this dot cell phone is equal to cell phone. So we'll say double, we'll say string cell phone, and we'll do the same for color. We'll set the color to color. This dot color is equal to color, and again we'll say, we'll set the megapixel camera to this dot megapixel camera to megapixel camera. Now we have our setters, and now we can have our getters. So this will return a string. You can say get cell phone, and we'll just return the cell phone. What's going on here? Oh, we can do the same for string. We can get the string, we can get the color of this, and then we return the color. Same procedure here, but this will be an int actually. And I should change this to int. So we'll get color and we'll return color. And again, I'm getting an error for some reason. Sorry. I don't know what I'm doing here. Megapixel camera, and we return megapixel camera. Now I'm going to instantiate this cell phone. I'm just gonna say C1 is equal to new cell phone. You know that we can set this to whatever cell phone we want to work with. We can set the color, we can set the megapixel using the .get and .set. Using the .set actually, and we can get those values using C1.get whatever the attribute we want to get. But in this instance, we're not going to do that. We're just going to create a constructor. So how do we create a constructor? We start with an access modifier. So by the way, I have to encapsulate these, otherwise there won't be any use for getters and setters. So these need to be encapsulated. And in here, this is where we create a constructor. So we can say public, the access modifier. This specifies whether or not this is accessible outside of the class. And the name of a constructor, it does not have a return type. You don't say void or int or string or whatever. You don't do that. It doesn't have a return type. It just has a name that is similar, or it's actually the same as the class that it is working in. So public cell phone has to be the same. So it's almost like a method. It is actually a method, but not your regular method. It does not have a return type, and it has to be the same name as the class it is inside. So whatever is inside here will get generated immediately when you instantiate your method, your object, sorry. So when I do this, whatever I write in here will get instantiated, will get executed immediately. So I can say hello world, and then when I run this code, and let's just wait for this to load, and we'll get hello world here. So immediately when we run this object, without having to say C1 dot whatever, without having to just print this out on the system out print line statement, it gets executed immediately. So why is this useful? We use a constructor to do this. So instead of saying C1, like here for instance, instead of saying C1 dot set something like this, C1 dot set cell phone and color and megapixel, we can do that directly in here. So as an argument, we can do something like this. We can have parameters, string, cell phone, and we can have another parameter, like, remember to separate with a comma, and we can say string color, and we can do the same thing for megapixel. So we can say int megapixel camera, and then down here we can say this cell phone of this class that we're working in, we set it equal to cell phone, the argument, the parameter actually of this method. And we'll do the same for color, and we'll set it to the color of this the parameter of this method, and we'll do the same thing for megapixel camera. And so when we run that, something is gonna happen. As you can see here, we're getting an error it says cell phone, lang, whatever, income cannot be applied to whatever this is. So what it actually wants us to do is to add arguments inside here. So we have to do it. So we have to add a cell phone. What can the cell phone name be? Let's say iPhone 12, and separate it with a comma, and we can add another argument like color. So another thing I wanted to talk about again is that what we're doing here is setting the parameters. So these are parameters, and then the actual values are arguments. So you have to keep you have to understand that some developers use those terms interchangeably, but they're not actually the same thing. But anyway, the color of this can be red. So we can have a red cell phone, and we can say 12 megapixel. So we can say C1, or just like this. So when we run this, we're not going to get any output because we haven't outputted anything. We haven't put anything on system out print line. We just set these to whatever they are. So what I want to do is, another thing I wanted to talk about is the toString method, but I'm not going to talk about it now. I just want to show you guys using this C1 dot details. So remember, this will show you what the details of that particular cell phone that you're working with. So when we run it, going back to our main method, we get something like name, iPhone, color, red, megapixel 12. And we can just add a little something here to specify that you're talking about megapixels. So that's like the unit of measurement for megapixel camera. And here we get 12 megapixels. And I wanted to talk about the toString method. It does something similar to what's happening here, but it's not printing out. It's not doing system.out.println. So the toString method is something like public string. It returns a string. It doesn't output anything automatically. It just returns a string. So it's called toString. So the toString method is actually, by default, it's actually created here in by Java. Like it actually exists inside every class that you create. So let me remove this and show you an example. I'm just going to say system out print line C1. It is created automatically, but you're not going to get any output. You're going to get something dummy, like a dummy text, like this com.tutorial cell phone and all this dummy that comes after this. So this is the package name, com.tutorial, and then cell phone is the class, and then this code here, I don't even know what it is. So this object, when you try to run this object inside system out print line, that's what you get. But when you use the toString method, you can overwrite this string that already exists and put something that makes actual sense. So you can say return you can set your own thing, like name is equal to, I don't know, you can say name is equal to cell phone, like that, and you can just add a comma, you know, something just human readable. It doesn't have to be well organized or something like that. It has to be readable. And you can add color also. You can separate it with a comma, and you can do the same thing. Megapixel is equal to megapixel camera. Just like that. Now when I run this, we're going to get a different output. So we've overridden the existing toString method. This is what you get for toString. So we've overridden that with our own toString method. So now when we run this, we get something like this, which is what we expected. It's good to do this. As you can see here, I'm not sure we're gonna get something like that. Okay, we don't. If you're coding in other editors, it's going to tell you to add the override and annotation here, because you're overriding an existing method. Now we're going to talk about overriding when we get to inheritance, but as of now, you need to know that when you're using the toString method, you need to override, you need to add this annotation. This is called an annotation. So when we go back there, it's going to do the exact same thing. Well, yeah, you need to understand that it's important to do this. But anyway, it's not that the code won't compile if you don't. So you can say c1.toString, but it's not necessary. It's really not necessary. Just say c1 and the toString method will be called automatically. Now that's what sets the toString method apart from all those other methods that you've been working with. And we'll go back here to the constructor. There's another thing I wanted to talk about here with regards to constructors. So you can leave your constructors empty like this. We can remove this. Okay. Let me just put this on the next line. So we can remove these, but when we remove it now, it's gonna want us to enter something. It wants us to add some values inside here. But sometimes we don't want to do that. So we can create a default constructor. This is what we call a default constructor, which has no parameters. And it can have something here if you want it to, but it also cannot if you don't want it to. So you can leave it like that. And you can also set the values of these to whatever default value you want it to be. It doesn't matter. It's all up to you. So say you've been working with, okay, never mind. Anyway, default constructor, now you don't get that error anymore. And when you run this, you're obviously going to be getting null values here because you haven't entered any value. So name is null, career null, megapixel 0 MP. So yeah, that's it with constructors. If I missed anything, then I'll talk about it on the next video.